Hello and welcome to another guide on the Bearfoot Miniatures channel. I'm joined today by Phil,
Yeah.
the real Phil, who has been making himself aware of all the Wood Elf range. And hopefully, Phil, you can make me aware as well as everyone else today on Wood Elves.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is something that I'm not the most of expert in elves, though I have been looking at the dryads recently.
All right.
So I thought, as with lots of these guides, why not bring on someone that knows more than me? Because I can't be an expert in everything, and I'm likely an expert in nothing. So the pressure's on Phil, basically, today, despite what I said right before this. We started recording.
Yeah. I'm feeling the pressure, but I reckon it'll be okay.
Well, I thought you're not someone to crack under pressure, so I'll mount a bit up.
Yeah. I'm not worried about what people say about me on the internet. So.
Oh no, that sounds challenging.
Yeah.
Right. So we're going to go over the Wood Elf list basically in the order of, like, we'll give you a bit of a general breakdown, then the special rules that can apply to the entire army. We'll leave the special rules that apply to specific units till we get to them. We'll give the lords in comparison, or the Wood Elf noble in comparison to other lords that we think of, and that can give a bit of context for the magic items. And then we'll sort of just run through the books. It's in quite a nice order, whereas some aren't. Like the chaos list dots about between, like, Forsaken over here and Spawn over here, and that's in the middle of infantry and monsters. But no, this runs in quite a nice order, so we'll just be working our way through the book after. Right. So Phil, do you want to take us away with your thoughts in general on Wood Elves?
Yeah. So I think Wood Elves are probably going to be proved to be one of the stronger factions. So they're very maneuverable, which is probably what you'd expect. They've also got a lot of, like, quite good sort of ranged weapons. You've got a lot of longbows across the army that can do quite a lot of sort of chip damage. They don't have really high strength shooting, but they do have a lot of, like, quite good high ballistic skill shooting across the army. They've also got, like, strong access to magic and to sort of monstrous creatures, in that you've got Treemen, Treekin, also Triads, but particularly Treemen and Treekin. And then they've got some very maneuverable, hard-hitting units like Wild Riders and Wardancers, and a lot of skirmish, if you want it, as well, in the army. So although they're not heavily armoured, and they're obviously, lots of the army is toughness 3, so pretty fragile, they are, I think, going to be pretty hard to pin down. And if you can maneuver well, and it will, I think, be quite unforgiving to play with Wood Elves potentially, because if you get caught out, they're going to die. But you should be able to avoid the sort of nasty bits of the enemy army and dictate the combats if you sort of learn to play the list well. So I do think, particularly given that the game's like a kill points game basically for most of the scenarios, you're not really having to sort of capture objectives and hold them, which would be a challenge if you had to do that throughout the game. But you don't have to do that. You can just sort of pick your fights. And I think because of that, they're going to be, I think, probably one of the better armies. If you're looking to play competitively, at least one of the better armies to play. But they do have a lot of variety. You don't have to play just in that way. They've got blocks of infantry if you want to take that, or, big, like, Treekin, say, if you want slightly slower, sort of harder, tougher units.
Yeah, I think, like, one thing that you touched on a couple of times there was the prevalence towards units that aren't big blocks of infantry. Now, that's something that I think it's been within Wood Elves for a few editions now, like Sixth, definitely, which I've played the most of, and I think, like, you've played at least a fair bit, which is how we met. And so it's something that's always been that they play very differently to a lot of other armies, and that, I think, can be one of their strengths, in that if you have mastered playing Wood Elves, or not mastered playing against them, which is mostly my experience with them,
Yeah,
because
same.
they're trying to do different things than a conventional rank and flank army, that can be punishing if they know how to exploit it. And it's the classic just like glass cannon army that was very, very strong in sixth, and I think it's got a lot of those traits, as Phil says, that it can be very, very powerful. Like, I mean, alignment with you on that one, I think.
That's a good start.
Yeah, well, it's a strong start to us just like gushing about wood elves, I suppose.
Yeah.
So let's get on to the special rules as like the primary one, and the first one I will do because I just know it really well because I've been over this one, is the elven reflexes, and this will be everything that's an elf in the list gets +1 to their initiative characteristic in the first round of combat to a maximum of 10, and that 10 will put you at the same initiative as impact hits. And that is a very strong rule to have on an army that is largely initiative 4 base, which will mean that you strike simultaneous with skeletons on the charge for both Tomb Kings and vampire counts.
Mm-hmm.
And it will it plays into the strengths of both, I think. The fast moving units, because your general movement speed is 5 rather than the 4 of like basic human armies. Obviously 3 dwarfs that everyone hates if you're watching the Wood Elf list. And I think it's a very powerful rule.
It is. I think the one thing I think in the Wood Elf list, I'm not sure it has as much application as it maybe does for the other elf factions, just because some of the key combat units probably aren't going to need it. And we'll maybe get onto that, but like Wardancers have strikes first. So it doesn't apply to them, for example. And so, yes, your Glade Guard get it, but they're probably going to die in combat. So, realistically, aren't they?
Fair enough.
So it is a nice rule, and it will definitely apply to some of the units and help them. But I think some others, although it can't be a negative, but I don't know that it's necessarily going to be maybe as helpful as it is possibly for the other elf factions. But it's obviously still a good rule.
So I suppose what it will mean is that if you've got an initiative, let's say an initiative 6 lord or noble, when you're initiative 7,
as well.
Yeah, right. Let's
see the point.
Yeah, well, I'm going to stick to it being useful, but let's go on to the next one.
It is useful. It is useful. It definitely is. I just think that you won't find it applying loads, but we'll see if I'm right.
Yeah, well, I think it applies maybe on like Fabigos a little bit more, because it's when you were initiative 4 with this, you will still be striking behind anything that charges, or like a lot of things that charge 3 inches at basic human stat lines. So it doesn't help you when they're getting that 3-inch charge or more. But if you fall back 2 inches, or you can march forward to 2 inches away from your opponent, it can help you get that strikes first even when you're not charging.
Yeah, true. Certainly not a bad thing to have.
No. Talismanic tattoos. This is a very fast one. This is like Wardancers mainly. But 6-up ward against any wounds suffered. 6-up is okay. I tend to just discount it if it's a 6-up. But it's definitely a thing that is okay.
It's better than not having it. But yeah, it's not. You're not relying on it. That's for sure.
Yeah. Tree spirits are in a bit more of the list than other ones, being on the branch wraiths and Treeman. What's the middle one? What Treekin? Yeah. Do you want to take us through what the tree spirits rule actually does?
Yeah. So this is about how tree spirits and elves interact, basically. So you can't join if you've got a character with this special rule, which is only a Treeman Ancient or a branch wraith. They can't join a unit without that rule. And the reverse is also true. So a unit with this rule can't be joined by an elf, basically, and can't use the leadership characteristic of an elf. But the reverse is not true. So elves can use the leadership characteristic of, basically it's only going to be Treeman Ancients, but they can use the leadership characteristic of Treeman Ancients. And similarly, you can use your tree spirits can use the leadership characteristic of another tree spirit when they're within its command range.
Yeah, and
so
the reason you say that it's only got to be Treeman is basically the leadership level of a branch wraith is equal
correct.
to the majority of your elf units anyway, so you're gaining no benefit there.
Yeah, that's it. But certainly the Treeman Ancients leadership 10. So that's definitely useful. And I do think this has some implications at the list building stage, because if you're thinking of taking a Treeman Ancient particularly, it makes sense to make him your general. Because then everyone can use his leadership, and he's got an 18-inch command range because he's a behemoth. So.
Yeah.
So it's an important one to understand for just the interaction of the elves and the tree spirits.
Yeah, and we can sort of get into that, I suppose, as we go through the units specifically. Tree Whack, this appears on the Ancient and the actual Tree Man.
Yeah, and I think on the Tree Kit.
So
they get Tree Whack as well, I think they might do.
If it's that many, shall we go through it at this point?
Yeah, so it's an option you've got when they're in combat, and that you don't have to do it. So it just takes up one of their attacks, and then instead of rolling to hit, they pick an enemy model. And it doesn't have to be in base-to-base contact, or at least that doesn't say it has to. They make an initiative test, and if they fail, they take D3 hits with the strength characteristic of the model, which is pretty high. It's like 4 for a Treekin, I think, and 5 for a Treeman. And they don't get armor saves, which is good. But obviously, if they pass the initiative test, they don't get hit. So you don't have to use that. So it's a nice option for you to have against a low initiative enemy like dwarves. But obviously, there are others. I mean, even on like a lot of humans, that would be a 50-50.
Yeah, especially because you're only sacrificing one of your attacks out of
multiple. Which might be 50-50 to hit anyway.
Yeah, so
you're hitting on 4, which you might be.
More of a bonus, I would say. Like, maybe not the greatest if you're in a challenge with an initiative 5 or 6 character, because obviously a 6 always fails on characteristic tests. So maybe not the best against that one, but definitely a good rule to just have in your back pocket.
Yeah, and there are things you can do with forest spikes to improve it a bit as well. So we can come to that. But yeah, it's not a bad one to have, and you can just not do that if it doesn't look like it's going to work.
Yeah. Finally, you've got the main rule of Wood Elves, I would say, which is the Woodland Ambush, in that no matter the actual story of your battle that's taking place, it's always a Woodland Ambush, because you're just so ambushy. And that's, you get an 8-inch by 12-inch piece of wood terrain, and you can deploy it anywhere on the table, not in your opponent's deployment zone or within 12 inches of the centre of the battlefield. That 12 inch of the centre of the battlefield, I actually found out this week, that's just a standard rule for the game. Because I was like, oh, who reads the terrain deployment rules? I certainly didn't, because I just put terrain to make a nice
I did know that, actually. I have to say, I did know that. And I can't remember why I'd looked that up. But yeah, you can't put it in the middle, which is a bit of a shame, because because the way the terrain placement rules work, it means it sort of, if you're using it, obviously, it creates that empty space in the middle, and it would be good to block that off. Or maybe bad for your opponent and bad for the game, but you can't do that. But it's still a very good rule. So just so much options there. You benefit a lot across the army list, as you'd expect from this, and your opponent usually does not. Obviously, some armies do have a lot of move through, but
it even comes into your casters, doesn't it? Like
a lot of magic items. Yeah, absolutely. Quite a few of the magic items you benefit from woods. So again, to have that control, and we'll obviously come to the magic items and what you might take and what sort of interesting ideas. But this gives you a lot of control over that, because if you need a wood to park a unit in, be it a caster or a unit of scouts, which there are lots of, or you want something to advance up to, you can do that. And you're always going to have at least one wood on the table. Obviously, there might be more.
Yeah.
Strong ability, I think. Very strong.
Yeah. let's go on to the armory section, the weapons of Athel Loren. And this includes a bow and some enchanted arrows. And they're in quite a few places across the list as their special weapons. So it's worth just giving them a shout at this point. So essentially you've got the Asari longbow, which is a 32-inch range, strength user, so largely strength 3, armor bane 1 volley fire bow, so which you're gaining their additional range of 8 inches, and armor bane 1 over most bows, over a hand bow at least. I suppose it comes the same as a longbow.
With an extra 2 inches of range.
Yeah. A decent... He's worth pointing out, but he's a decent bow.
It's not as good as it was in 6th edition, but that's probably for the best.
Potentially. The enchanted arrows, though, are very good, I would say. You've got the Arcane Bodkin, which is -2 AP. Even though they're ensorcelled, they don't gain the magical attacks rule, which Chaos ensorcelled stuff does.
Well, yeah, one of them specifically gives you magical attacks. I guess that's why they went for that.
Yeah, it just... don't include that.
It's a strange one, isn't it? I mean, it's an enchanted but not magical arrow.
Yes. Weird.
Yeah.
Weird. The Hagbane Tips gives you poisoned attacks, special rule, so that will mean on a 6 to hit, you automatically wound, which can be a big bonus because your strength user bows will maybe struggle to wound toughness 4 opponents like dwarves, chaos warriors, beastmen.
And it's just good, isn't it? It's just more wounds, even against lower toughness.
Yeah.
You don't get armor bane, obviously, on that 6. That hasn't been FAQ'd. So if you roll a 6 to hit, there's no armor bane because you're not rolling to wound. So.
Yeah, fair enough. It seems fair enough to me. We've got Moonfire Shot. So an Asari longbow with a Moonfire Shot gains flaming and magical attacks.
Yeah. Situational.
Yeah, now flaming, to have it across your army, I go backwards and forwards on this, right? It's one of them things that if you have in too many places, or specifically I think on your lords and heroes, can hurt because like a 3-up ward specifically against flaming can happen quite often. And it's in many army lists that they've got magic items that allow that. And it's quite cheap. Like I think the Dwarf Rune of Forging is like 10 points for a 3-up ward against flaming.
Yeah, bang it on.
Yeah, so it can be a downside, but when you're putting them on less valuable units and have them more widespread, it can become less of a downside because you don't have to target that specific character.
Yeah.
Like in a challenge or something.
And it's a ranged attack anyway, so you're obviously going to be picking your target. Unless you're standing and shooting it.
Or you're a Waywatcher Lord that can be sniping out people.
True.
Yes. But yeah, it's alright. The Swift Strider Shards gives your longbow multiple shots 2, special rule. Which is okay.
Yeah. It's the negative to hit. That obviously, if it didn't have that, it'd be amazing, but it does.
Well, it's a negative
your
to
additional
hit. In being a bit more boys over toys on a lot of things, I know that obviously the price of the arrows don't equal the price of expensive heroes or anything like that. But getting more just Blade Guard even that are BS4 with longbows to just pepper people a bit more. And it can be situationally useful to get multiple wounds on like a wizard if you've got a Waywatcher Lord. Or a Waywatcher character. But yeah, with the minus to hit, I am 50-50 with it.
Yeah.
And then the True Flight Arrow, you gain ignores cover and quick shot special rules. Which I actually quite like. The quick shot.
I think that's good. Yeah, it's good, and particularly on some units. I think. I mean, you can do a lot of maths on which of these is best, and I don't think there is a clear best option. I mean, arcane bodkins are obviously good, I would say, and hagbane tips are also obviously good because poison, particularly given that you don't have a lot of high strength shooting.
Yeah.
So having poison, I think, is really useful when you're coming up against those like high toughness, monstrous infantry or monstrous cavalry or whatever, or just like toughness 4 in the army. And just generally for getting more wounds through. I think both of those are good options. Moonfire Shot is much more niche. Because obviously if you want to hurt something that's ethereal, it's excellent, but are you that bothered about that? You might be.
I suppose it's how many like Tomb King's armies are popping up in your meta.
Yeah.
Has everyone got a million Tomb King's chariots that are charging about whatever just to double those wounds?
I mean, and then it would be good. And you don't have to, like, this is a unit by unit selection, and you don't have to take them. So you can have a mix, and that's my sort of preferred approach. Is I like a mix of a few of the types, and I do think there's some units where certainly Truth Light arrows are good. But we can cover that when we come to the units themselves.
The Truth Light arrow's in a bit of a weird spot, I think. With such a high ballistic skill across the army, it's obviously a benefit. Moving and firing is obviously a benefit. But the downside is that you're paying for something with already quite a high ballistic skill to not take the negative. So
that's true, but I guess my thinking is you've got units that might be moving and in a wood. Right, so immediately you're -2, and you ignore both of those things.
Yeah, I actually quite like them. It's just that you're going to have to think about it while you're doing your army selection of where they'll actually go.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think they're a choice for certain units only. Like, if you're really thinking, like, your Glade Guard, I'm primarily thinking I'll give them either Arcane Bodkins or Hagbane. A mix across the army, probably. I wouldn't anticipate they're going to be moving as much when they're firing. But some of the other units, scouting and cavalry and stuff.
Do you know what? It's the Glade Guard that I would be thinking would benefit more from the True Flight with a lower ballistic skill than, say, the Nobles and Weight Watchers that you're thinking that you can use them to. It was a strength in 6th, I think, that he didn't take penalties for that single move, and just being able to get your Glade Guard and almost use them like a disposable, like, do you know when you've got a unit of Chaos Warhounds? Phil also plays Chaos. When you've got a unit of Chaos Warhounds and you're like, this is my cheapest unit, I'm going to move up, and these guys can move up and fire and just be in the way that much closer to the enemy. But I suppose we can get onto that when we get onto the Glade Guard. Yeah, so shall we go on to the Nobles then?
Yes.
Because this will give us a bit of context for going over the magical items. So for 135 points, you've got a movement 5, which is obviously base for elves, weapon skill 7, ballistic skill 7. Don't really need them true flight arrows. Strength 4, toughness 3, wounds 3, initiative 6, 4 attacks and leadership 10. So a fairly solid profile, other than the toughness, which is terrible.
I think basically the same as all elf lords, right? I think it's the same profile, I think.
Yeah.
And obviously the top is dreadful, but you've got to live with that.
Yeah, it's just part of playing the glass cannon army.
You get some interesting special rules though, that I think.
Yeah, well, do you want to take us through them?
Yeah, so you've got the Arrow of Kurnos, which is a quite a lengthy one I'll come to. Evasive, so you can fall back in good order, I think it is, away from shooting, which is good. Fire and Flee, also good. You've got Ignores Cover, so again, you're not needing those True Flight arrows because you already cover. Move Through Cover, which loads of not all, but nearly all units in the army list have it. Rallying Cry, obviously, as you'd expect, and Strike First. So, The Arrow of Kurnos is the sort of unusual one, and you can see it's got this rule where when you've deployed, but before you roll off to determine who's going to go first, you can, if the general of your opponent's army is within 36 of a model in your army that's got this rule, you can fire the Arrow of Kurnos, which hits automatically, and your opponent's general immediately takes a strength 3 hit. Can't take armor or regen saves, but can take ward saves. But the downside of it is that then your opponent adds +1 for the roll to go first. And I'm going to say I don't think I'll be using that very often.
No, for a strength 3 hit, to not have your... As Wood Elves, largely you're going to be... Like, I'm going to say a gun line, but a bow line. And type army. And for your opponent to have moved up before you got to fire, like, definitely. Or not definitely, but to get the +1.
Very probably, yeah. It's just...
It's not worth it to potentially lose that shooting phase more often, I wouldn't say.
No. I mean, I'm not saying you never do it. There'll be times when it's the right thing to do, but it's not. It's just not going to be wounding. You know, you're wounding like Chaos Lords and Dwarfs on 6s. I mean,
yeah. I mean, if it's a Empire Wizard, I might consider it. Maybe.
Yeah. And you finished deploying first, so you're already getting +1.
Yeah. So,
for example, it's very situational. Right?
I think we're grasping here is like grasping at straws to try and find a proper situation where I'd use it. I'm not even sure whether I would use it against an Empire Wizard Lord, because
you're probably better off just having a better chance at first turn.
Yeah, agreed. So how would we kit if we taking magic items off the table? How would we be kitting out the Wood Elf Lord?
Well, so that's very interesting because he doesn't have as many options as certainly other elf lords, because you can't take a lance.
Mm-hmm.
Your only weapon options are a hand weapon, another hand weapon, so you've already got one, a great weapon or a cavalry spear. So you can't take a lance. You can take a shield, but you can't take anything better than light armor. So you're without magic items, and certainly without mounts, you're not going to have a very good save. I think the great weapon is a good choice because you've got strikes first.
Yeah.
So obviously your strikes first and strikes last are cancelling out. So your great weapon's going at initiative 6 base plus whatever you get if you charge. So I think if I'm taking a mundane weapon, it's probably a great weapon.
Yeah. Same. Right. So we're in alignment on the great weapon. Cavalry spear, I think, has a slight look in depending on how you're mounted. And should we go into the mounts at this point, or do you want to save them until after great weapon or after magical?
No, I think we should, because there's obviously different ways you can build your lord. So there's you can obviously tool them up for combat, be it for chewing through rank and file or like to take on challenges or hard characters. But you can also build a Glade Lord or a Glade Captain as a kind of shooting character. And the mounts do play into that for me.
Yeah.
Quite a bit. I mean, he obviously comes with a longbow, and you can take magic arrows, and it's probably a good idea to, because even if you've got a combat character, you're going to spend some turns not in combat, potentially not marching, and so to be able to fire off, an AP2 strength 4 shot isn't a bad thing, for example.
Yes.
So I'd probably, if I've got the points, like 6 points and arcane buckins, I'd probably do that. Even on a combat character.
It might as well be done just for chipping away and just complementing the rest of your army. Even with -2 to hit, you're still hitting on 2s. With a lord, with a captain, like, you can take the -1, still hit on 2s.
Yeah, so he's going to hit a lot even moving, and I think it's worth doing, and it's kind of fun. Gives him something to do when he's not in combat.
Yeah. Let's start with the most obvious one, Phil.
I assume you're talking there about the steep. No, the forest dragon, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I suppose Wood Elf Lords particularly aren't melting down the internet at the moment, but dragons are very prevalent in the current thoughts on the game. So with a dragon, you're going to go to toughness 6. You're going to go to wounds 9, which is like fairly standard across like anyone that's on a dragon. You've got your movement 6 of the dragon, but actually flying 10. So most of the time, unless you've been like Horn of Freeman did, you're going to be moving 20 inches a turn on the march. And you've got Swift Stride for when you charge, for charging a total of 19 inches, if you manage to make it. Initiative 4 on the dragon, 6 attacks as per, and because it's one of the more expensive dragons at 275 points, one of the better dragons.
Yes, I think so. So you've got this split profile of attacks where you've got the strength 7 minus 2 AP claws, and then you've got the serrated maw, which is again strength 7 but is armor bane 2 instead, but multiple wounds, and you've got to make one of your attacks with that. So that is what it is. It's not bad, I don't think.
No, I wouldn't say so. It's nice to just have the beast that's doing multiple things. I'm not really swayed one way or the other in game terms.
No, which is better. It depends what you're up against, doesn't it? But it is obviously very good to be on that dragon.
Yeah. Now, one thing I will say is I really like the breath weapon on the forest dragon. Although it's only strength 2, so against toughness 4, you're not doing the best. But being able to put the flamer template down and be like, well, you guys don't have an armor save.
Yeah. There's a lot of stuff that will be very good against. Bretonnian Knights aren't going to enjoy that, for example. Empire Knights, obviously, also.
Yeah. Anything toughness 3 is going to have a bad day. Just by ignoring that step of just removing a lot of wounds. It's a good breath weapon, I would say. It's
not a flaming attack, so it doesn't get the benefits and disbenefits of that. Because some stuff has benefits against flaming attacks, so I'm not sure that changes the sort of thinking at all, but it isn't. It's soporific. Does that mean it sends them to sleep? I don't know. Anyway.
Is that what that means?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
the most boring of breath weapons.
Exactly. And big for your elf lord is obviously that toughness boost, but also in the case of the wood elves, it gives him full plate, which he otherwise isn't getting. And now, there are ways to get from your light armor and shield further to a better save without the dragon, but obviously that full plate is, I think, good. You can't, unless I've missed a combination, you can't build the kind of 2+ save and ward and regen type monster that certain other elven factions can bring.
Even though the Seed of Rebirth comes
I don't
from
want to talk about
the wood.
I don't want to talk about that. It's just another reason to hate high elves.
Well, they've also got the Cloak of Beard, so like dwarf players hate them.
Exactly. They've got everyone should hate them.
Yeah, they've got the Seed of Rebirth, but they've got lots of them because it's like the bag of sesame seeds of rebirth that anyone can take. But I imagine it's too painful for everyone listening, so we can gloss over that bit. The toughness, as you said, is very good, like in just allowing something that is so tough and manoeuvrable outside of the Treeman Ancient. Now, the full plateness of the Forest Dragon, I would say, is much better than in most other armies, actually, because it's not eating into your magical item allowance to get that 4+ at least. Whereas in other armies, even with mundane equipment, you're largely on a Lord getting better than a 4+ save if you want. Like just with heavy armor, shield, and some sort of barding on a horse, you're getting a 3-up. So it just stacks it a bit more nicely. Now, we can talk about the benefits, actually, I think, of Forest Dragons versus Warhawks, specifically when we get to like the casters in the list, because they interplay a little bit differently than when we get onto Nobles, so we can give a brief mention of that when we get there. But let's go on to the less dragony, rage-inducing for everyone. As you mentioned, the Elven Steed. Movement 9 comes with fast cavalry and swift stride and a single strength 3 attack, right? For 14 points. He's cheap, he's basic. But having...
Not bad.
No, having fast cavalry and the light cav special rule fits in with your Glade Riders and Wild Riders, right?
Yeah. There is a bit of a downside to putting him in with your Wild Riders, because they'll lose counter charge. Yeah. They'll lose counter charge, and I think you need to think really carefully about that.
So it's something that it might catch out more with a Wood Elf player, but it's not something actually I found that much comes into it with my Chaos. It's just being that bit more mindful and also being flexible with placement. So when you're against an army that has lots of knights and faster moving units with Swift Stride, you might not want to put them in that unit specifically and put them in a different unit, or have them floating about on their steed to join the charge when needed and not when not. But yeah, a lot against infantry predominated forces, I don't find counter charge comes into it that much, because obviously it requires monstrous infantry, cavalry, things like that. So if I'm outranging my opponents and skirting on the edges of the charge range, it's just something that it's not been as big of a downside as I thought it would be when I first started playing the Old World.
And in fairness, with Wild Riders, which obviously we will come on to, having Frenzy, you already have to think pretty carefully about where they're going and screening them. So maybe that wouldn't be such an issue. But it's obviously not a bad cheap option. You're not getting the option to put barding on. So you're not going to have a great save. You therefore are either going to want to hide it in a unit, hide it near a unit, or look to the magic items for some kind of protection. It's obviously an option though, and for smaller games, or if you're looking for a cheap option, or maybe for your battle standard if you have one.
Yeah. Now, the Great Stag, this, I think, is one of my favourite, like, sort of monstrous cavalry level creatures.
Yeah, it's very good, I think.
Yeah, so movement 8, yes, it's slowing down your cavalry units by 1 move. So you're the same
still quite quick, though.
Yeah, you're still an inch quicker than most other cavalry units that include barding, the same as a lot of the ones that don't, like Marauder Horsemen. You got Strength 5, which is like Demonic Mount level of strength, like Royal Pegasus. Normal Pegasus isn't Strength 5. You got +1 Toughness, so starting to mitigate the Elves' low toughness. +1 Wound, which is solid, never a downside to +1 Wound. Now, 2 attacks coming with AP -1 included and Armor Bane 1, I think is where it starts to be like, oh, actually, this is actually really good. And then
plus impact hits.
Yeah, plus the impact hits, plus a stomp attack.
Yeah.
So a Demonic Mount for Chaos Lords gets 2 stomp attacks. This is slightly better than that in that it will come at initiative higher. Or potentially, I suppose, because you're obviously not getting it just in ongoing combats, but largely if you're in too many ongoing combats, as you alluded to at the start. Yeah, big problems. Armoured Hide 2 is great here.
Really good. So you can. This, I think, is one of the ways to go. Is obviously if you're not wanting to invest the points into a dragon or blade dragon, and you can build a quite tough lord. It's the only way I can see to get to a 2-up save in combination with magic item, because you've got your armored hide 2, your light armor, shield.
Mm-hmm.
So then you need an extra 1, which you can get. So be that for a lord or a glade captain, if you've got a PSB, for example, I think it adds a lot of protection to have that 2-up save, toughness 4, and then 3 or 4 wounds. Plus, obviously, you cause fear, which maybe isn't the biggest, because you're not probably going to outnumber stuff with your fear-causing units, but I guess it means you're not worrying about fear yourself. You've also got first charge. I think the stag is a very good choice, definitely.
Yeah. Onto the unicorn, which I think is more
the mages only.
Yeah. Shall we do that at a point of mages? Because I've just carried on through.
Yeah.
They're keeping me to the right actual order. And then we've got the Warhawk then. The budget flying option.
Yeah.
You've got toughness +1, no addition to wounds, 2 attacks at strength 4, with evasive, so the fall back in good order if you were shot at. Fear, feign flight, so you automatically regroup if you choose to flee as a charge reaction. Fly 10 and swift stride.
Good. So Warhawks are really good character mounts. They're I think probably better for casters, but there is a case for them for a noble as well, particularly if you're wanting to build a shooty noble. The Warhawk's a really good platform to do that, because it's obviously very maneuverable. You've got that bit of a bonus going to toughness 4. Okay, it's not amazing, but it's a lot better than toughness 3. You're then very hard to catch with all that evasive and feign flight, both really good rules. And you're a skirmisher still, so you've got a 360-degree line of sight. Oh, and you can hide near cavalry and not be picked out. Yeah. So if you are wanting to have a Glade Lord even on a Warhawk to do more of a kind of shooting kind of build, I think it's the Warhawk that you would go for. You've obviously also got the Eagle as a flying mount, but the Warhawk, if you're wanting that more like skirmishing around, picking stuff off, I think is very good. I do think that probably overall better for casters, but there's a case for them for a Glade Lord as well.
Yeah, so it's maybe something that we should answer at the end of the magic items section. But
yes,
my feeling is that with Lords, going back, I'll flick back to the Lords page just for everyone's visuals. But my feeling with Lords overall is that you want to be going, and this is across armies rather than something specific to Wood Elves, that you want to be going combat with your hardest character that you've paid a lot for, when you can get shooting items on many things and in many places. My feeling is to take advantage of the highest weapon skill attacks that you're going to get in the army. Actually, what are your thoughts at this point? And then we'll see if I've reformed my thoughts by the end of the magic items list.
I think that's generally true, and I don't know if I will take a sort of shooty lord, partly because I don't have one, so that's probably the major reason. And I'm not sure I'm keen enough on the idea to actually make one, but I do think that it would be an interesting thing to try, and because it does rely on on magic items. Otherwise, it's definitely better.
Yeah, definitely. Otherwise, you're getting a guy that hits on 2s when you can hit on 2s with other people.
And he's only got one shot. I mean, what's he going to do? That's the big thing. So Warhawks are really good mounts, and you could still take a Warhawk as a sort of more budget combat character, or in a smaller game particularly, you might look at that.
Yeah, well, he's got quite a nice, and I'll go back to the Warhawk page. He's got quite a nice AP on its attacks.
Yeah,
like for such a low costed mount, that AP -2, that's like dragon levels of AP, which is a really good amount for your lord to be having. So yeah, it's just that manoeuvrable option. My feeling is to go with the stag, to be honest, as my actual favourite choice out of any of these.
Yes, I think my favourite choice is the dragon, mostly. Well, obviously because it's very good, and also because I really like the Old Forest Dragon model, and I'm lucky enough to have one. So there's that, but I wouldn't actually use a dragon every game, or probably even a lord every game, a noble every game, a glade lord. So yeah, we've also got the Great Eagle.
The Great Eagles, we've got a 60-point upgrade as a character mount, in which you get still a movement of 2 if you get grounded. Weapon skill 5, strength 4, toughness +1, wounds +1, initiative 4, 3 attacks plus 60 points, and you're going to have the special rules of the actual Great Eagle, which is close order, and you're a monstrous creature. Fear, fly 10, stomp attacks 1, swift stride. Your wicked claws are -2 AP, and one of the attacks is going to be, again, this armor bane 2, multiple wounds 2, like the dragon.
Yeah.
Bit of a halfway house.
Yeah.
Though more towards the lesser side of halfway. If I was going to do a super fast lord, like, I mean, I'm already going to do. I'm already thinking along that lines of Warhawk being 2 attacks at the AP -2 anyway. It's the same strength, same fly value. Although it's got that 1 stomp attack, it's at -0.
It's a sort of close order, and I think that's something not to forget, because you don't have as much of that as maybe other armies do. So that's true, obviously not just for the Eagle, but for some of the other things as well. But actually, it's not a bad thing to have something with close order that you can fly into a combat. The problem is, do you want that as a character mount? Because you can obviously take an Eagle without a character on it. Yeah. And you're not getting you're getting the bonus to both toughness and wounds, which is good. But unlike the stag, you're not getting any help with your armor save. So you're potentially going to be still really quite sort of squishy on that Eagle. And unlike the Warhawk, you can't hide near cavalry. You can't say I'm within 3 inches of this unit of Glade Riders, so you can't pick me out. So I think the Great Eagle, it's obviously a lot cheaper than a dragon, but it is, like you say, a halfway house, and it's not the best of any of those worlds. Like the stag, I think, is a really good choice. And the Warhawk, if you're wanting to sort of flit around and be evasive, and still, get into a combat and do some damage. The Eagle isn't what I would look towards as a mount, I don't think.
Well, I think it's a big point, is the not being able to hide near other units, being able to be targeted out, and only being toughness 4 and 4 wounds with not a very good armor save. Is such a drawback.
You're going to have to then invest quite heavily in magical protection.
Yeah, and I think Great Eagles, just as a quick precursor to when we get onto them in the monstrous creature section, Great Eagles themselves, I think, are really good. It's just, as you say, in the context of mounts. Right, so let's work through the magic weapons, and then we'll get to just so that we're not explaining what's going on. The Spirit Highlight is a -2 AP killing blow magical attacks that always wounds on a 3+. So mitigating a little bit of that. I'm going to say lower strength, but it's not that low. It's the same as most human characters. But the always wounded on 3+ regardless of toughness just means it's a bit better at hunting down, obviously, the toughness 5 opponents. It's a bit better at hunting down the toughness 5 opponents. I don't think it's much better, or actually, I don't think it's better at all than the Ogre Blade.
No, I don't.
It's one of the things that's every list review I've sort of got to throw it in, is that I'm not the biggest fan of any of the magic weapons from pretty much any list. There's one or two that are okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's worse than the Ogre Blade just on its own.
Yeah.
I think I'd rather have the Ogre Blade in those situations.
Yeah. But as you say, you can slot in with some other items. We've got the Blades of Loek.
Yeah. The Trickster God, yes.
So I didn't pronounce it horrendously.
No, I think that's right. I mean, no Wood Elf has told me that that's wrong. So
touche, Phil. Touche. So for 45 points, we've got the extra attacks D3 magical attacks. And there's two blades, so it requires two hands, and it can reroll fail to wounds.
No. Not very good. I mean, I'm not saying that's a bad weapon, but no AP, I think, is quite bad. So you might think you'd give it to a Shadowdancer, the Wardancer character, but I don't think you would, because he comes base with definitely one good weapon option. So I wouldn't spend 45 points to give him one that's arguably not better. So yeah, I don't think I'll be taking that weapon.
So another pass. We've got the Bow of Lauren for 40 points, range 32, same as the Asari longbow, strength user, armor bane 1, magical attacks. So you don't need to buy the bodkins of magical attackness, but
you don't. That's true.
The wielder of the Bow of Lauren makes a number of shooting attacks equal to their attack's characteristic rather than one. It doesn't suffer modifiers for multiple shots.
Yeah, so that's where you're starting to think that like a sort of a shooting lord makes a bit more sense, because you're then getting 4 attacks every turn with this thing, which, let's say you take Arcane Bodkins, because that's probably what you'd take with this, I think. So you're getting 4 strength 4, range 32-inch, AP 2, armor bane 1 attacks. Now, obviously, you're putting that on a very expensive platform if you put it on the Glade Lord, but that's not bad. I mean, if he's then on a Warhawk to sort of flit around, or even on foot, actually, you could use that with a character on foot. There's obviously other, like, you give it to a Glade Captain, you're then getting a bit less value out of your 40 points because he's only got 3 attacks, but he's a much cheaper character. I mean, I think the Bow of Lauren has a place.
Yeah,
I think it's not bad.
Yeah, I agree. It's one of those things, a lot of the times when I've not been liking the weapons in the magic lists, it's largely because other combat-based weapons exist in the generic items list that are actually quite good themselves. Whereas because the Bow of Lauren stacks with the various bodkins, and is also removed from what elsewhere you can get, I definitely think it's got a place. Like, my instinct would be to put it on the Glade Captains, as you mentioned, or like out of the various things, because it's less of an investment, and I'm not as much wasting my magic items limit when I want my lords to be cracking combats that I really need help with.
Yes. Yeah. And I do think even if you've got a lot of shooting in your list, you're going to need to win some combats.
Yeah.
So I think that supports that for me. I agree. I think, like, it sounds good to put it on the Glade Lord, but I'm not convinced that I myself doing that very often.
Yeah, well, I know, like, the Talisman of Protection and Ogre Blade is too obvious of a choice all the time, but at the 40 points amount into that 100 points, it's so limiting of what else can go in there, like what other pair of items can go into your magic item slots, as well points, as being in the magic weapons area. So then I can't have a magic, like, Sword of Battle or something like that. Even if I wasn't choosing the Ogre Blade, I can't have something else because that's taking up my magic weapons slot. So the Ascendry's Bane for 10 points, 32-inch range, armor bane 1, magical attacks, and quick shot. and you can re-roll a single fail to hit during the shooting phase. However, the re-roll fails to hit, you suffer a strength 3 hit with an AP of dash.
Pretty niche. I mean, it's cheap, obviously.
Yeah, but it's helping you hit better. Re-rolling the to hit, and you're only really going to get one shot anyway, unless you take the multiple shot bodkins. But I quite like it as the 10 points level, because a lot of the times they have 10 points of the items limit left, and just be like
quite a few characters you could put that on as well. Obviously your Lord, but your Glaive Captain, your Waystalker, which we'll obviously come to, might be another candidate for this, if you take one. So, yeah.
If you take a Waystalker, you're saying we're not going to be using Waystalkers with Ruby Rings of Ruin and recommending it all video?
Well, I mean, that would be very good.
just a thought. So we'll get onto the magic armor. The Helm of the Hunt for 50 points. It can be worn with other armor because it's a helmet. It improves the armor save by 1. This is, I believe, what you were referencing for the Forest Dragon going to a 2-up. Stag, going to a 2-up.
Yeah.
In addition, you've got +1 to both the weapon skill and attacks on a turn that you charge. Which is fairly good to have all of those benefits.
I think that's it, isn't it? It's like the fact that it's one of the pieces that gets you to that 2-up save in an army where, obviously that's difficult to do is one thing, but then those other benefits of adding to your weapon skill and attacks. So your Glaive Captain, obviously it would use his whole magic item allowance, but if he was on a stag, he'd have a 2-up, and then he'd be charging with 4 attacks at weapon skill 7.
Yeah, so it'd also make me more confident to go great weapon as well.
Yeah, agree. Yeah,
because it gives you that 3-up regardless of using a shield.
So you can take the shield for shooting still. It's only a point.
Yeah. I'd definitely still take it, but it would give me the confidence that with a great weapon, even against someone else's great weapon, I can have this, a Talisman of Protection, be 85 points, and have a 5-up, 5-up. And I've got +1 attack and weapon skill on the charge.
Solid.
So...
Very good item, I think.
Yeah. The Relarian's Mantle. Yeah, I'm going to stick to that one. 35 points. It's a suit of light armor, which is of no benefit to a lot of the characters that can take this.
No.
In addition, whilst its wearer is within 6 of a woodland terrain feature that handily you'll have one because of your special rules, you gain a 4+ ward against any wounds suffered.
So obviously a 4-up ward's very good. I think more data is required for me to decide whether this is a viable choice. So we can, as we will come on to the spells, obviously, and you can create ones via magic. I don't think that's massively reliable. Obviously, you're placing 1 wood, but the problem for me is I just don't know. I might put that on a Dragon Lord, but can I rely on him being near a wood? I'm not sure I can, because he needs to go and fight stuff that might not be near the wood. I don't know. I've not ruled that out, but I want to play a few more games to see if I can actually... how often am I actually within 6?
Did I tell you
key character?
The other day, by the way, disaster struck, I had a load of water damage to my house, and it selectively ruined my box of woods terrain.
Oh, don't worry, I can brew plenty.
And that should be the answer of any Wood Elf player.
Exactly. I've got several woods. And that's the thing, isn't it? It could be amazing. And you can, through tree singing, which we'll obviously talk about later, effectively create woodland terrain. But how reliable that is open to question, I think. So it's not hugely expensive. The problem is you're not then... Well, I suppose you could take that under Talisman of Protection, actually. Good, yes.
Yeah, because they're in different slots. I think it's a bit wasteful. For that 35 points, I could be getting another level of wizardry on someone that can be tree singing and more reliably get that tree singing off. So I'd like it as an item, and that'll come into it, as you said, when we go through this tree singing. And stack, I think, with some of the arcane items, when you start sort of compounding each other to get these benefits in various places that you might want them throughout the
Yes. Agree.
I'm going to let you pronounce the next one.
Mersu's Locus.
Yes. So, what does it do?
This is a funny one where it says that you can't have your strength modified by any weapon. Magic, so that would include a magic weapon and obviously a great weapon or a lance or whatever. But the strength characteristic of any model that attacks you in combat can't be modified by any weapon either. So that's where the combination, because obviously it debuffs you as much as your opponent, but you plan for that because you're taking it, you know that. So you're not taking a great weapon and this item, obviously, because that would be very silly. And that's where the Spear of Twilight comes in. Because of that, it doesn't modify your strength, it just wounds on a 3.
Fair enough. Now, there is that. On the flip side of it, I would say the amount of character levels that are the amount of characters of the same level as your Glade Lord, Black Orc bosses, Chaos Lords, even Chaos Heroes, even Empire Captains are strength 4, so they will all be wounded on 3s anyway. So I think as a 100-point combination, unless you're on Dragon, where you then go to strength 6, toughness 6, which is I think what you were saying at the start of the section, or if you said it again now, I'm sorry, like I've not registered it. That I think it's in that specific situation.
Agree. You're not taking it in any other situation, I don't think. It's for when he's on the Dragon. And I'm not even convinced it's actually the best option there. I think it's quite a sort of interesting and unusual approach because it's a talisman, you've then not got a ward save. And you can't afford to have this and the Spear of Twilight and Rylarian's Mantle. So you've definitely not got a ward save, unless you get spell off on him, obviously. So, yeah, it is for that combination with the Forest Dragon, but then you have to accept that you're not going to have a ward save. There are other ways to protect yourself because you can take Forest Spikes that can help, but only in combat. So it does make you, in a way, like you've got to get into combat and ideally into a challenge to protect yourself fully with that. But it's a nice combat. I like it. I'm not sure it's actually better than taking a great weapon and a talisman of protection, maybe.
Yeah, but that would be my thoughts, being the simple-minded human that I am.
I think it's not better. It just isn't, because it's a lot more expensive than that combination. You're putting an extra 70 points or 60 points in, and you're probably not better overall, really. So, yeah, you're not going to... You just have to accept that a Wood Elf Lord on Forest Dragon isn't winning a fight with a High Elf Lord on a Dragon. But that's the way of things.
Next, we've got the Glamour Weave for 30 points. Enemy models must take a leadership check before any rolls to hit against the wearer of the Glamour Weave. If failed, only rolls of 6 will hit.
Pass. I mean, it's just not reliable enough for me. There's loads of items like this. It's a bit like the Unicorn Zora, but you just get that inbuilt on the Unicorn, so that's different. But I'm not paying 30 points for this.
Yeah, anything that leadership is too... I don't think it's too high from a game perspective across the board.
No.
But from a paying 30 points to gain this benefit perspective, leadership is too high for it to be effective.
Yeah, definitely, because I don't know if we need to go into this more, but often that you want that most against the highest leadership characteristics in the opposing army.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I think it's spot on for my thoughts of it, really.
Yes.
Yes. Magic standards. We've got the Banner of the Wildwood for 40 points. Basically, gain fear, or if you've got fear, gain terror. I am here and there on it.
So what I would say is there's actually quite a lot in the Wood Elf list that either has terror or can use terror.
As it has fear already, so could then bump up to
correct. So like
yeah.
the place I would think of putting this is on Wild Riders, who already have fear. So
Yes.
then they've got terror.
So then they would be causing the minus or the leadership check when they charge someone, or obviously giving the -1 to a break test.
Exactly. So, and you want your combats to be decisive. I mean, they, like pretty much most things in the list, are glass cannons. So you don't want to be getting bogged down. So I do think that -1 to the leadership is pretty good for Wild Riders. So I would consider that there. 40 points is not cheap, but it's not outrageous.
No, the next one though, and with the stack, I agree with you. I quite like it. The Banner of the Hunter King though for 25 points, and this is something that's in the Bretonnian Exiles list as well. Gaining Vanguard on a unit, and the 25 points fits into the Magic Standards limits of lots of units. Gaining Vanguard on a unit of knights or Wild Riders that can move 9 in their Vanguard move, and then charge up to 18 inches, I think is incredibly good for only 25 points. The ramifications of of your first turn charges.
I mean, yeah, someone's going to be sad when they don't see that one coming.
Yeah, I think it's one of the... If you were not a Wood Elf player, or you're a Wood Elf player and you're playing Bretonnian Exiles, this is an item to look out for in all situations. It's like the Dwarf Rune of Confusion and Hesitation. It's when you were at army list stage, look out for this, or specifically ask where this is going, because it will have immediate ramifications in the game.
Definitely. I mean, the only thing with Wild Riders being frenzied, you can't. You've got to be mindful that they could get baited. But I suppose if they're vanguarding, they'll have quite a few charge targets potentially.
Yeah, so I think it's one of the things with the higher movement units, and even with the Vanguard, you use that and have a bit of a wheel during your movement, so that the nearest unit that I'm in arc of is the one that I want to charge, or I just put myself in charge range of so many units, and that one of the ones that is the one that I want to pick.
That's it, yeah.
And then motor on through the enemy lines in the first turn, so that I'm now in the rear. Incredibly good.
Yeah, very good. Agreed.
We've got the Banner of the Eternal Queen for 20 points. Claim an additional bonus of +1 combat res when within 6 inches of a woodland terrain feature. Do you want to say first, or me?
It isn't one of the banners that I look at immediately and think that's going to be very good. I don't know. I can't quite make up my mind on it. I haven't used it.
I think it is terrible, because it's for 5 points more. I can have a war banner.
True. I hadn't
and that's +1 all the time. Just leading round to it is like been looking at like banners all day actually, and if it was, I think this should be like 10 points.
Yeah,
and
agreed.
Like the end of the list, you throw it on because I'm going to have some woods about. But for 5 points more to just always have that is just too much of an auto. Or if it was 1 all the time and 2 within 6 inches of woods for 35 points, I'd consider that.
Yes.
But to only be the same as something else that I can take, and the other thing is all the time, no.
And you're always going to be able to find 5 points.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't take as many enchanted arrows, always going to be able to go.
I think there's a hard sell in this list, though.
Well, that's true. You don't have to take whatever.
You can always justify the enchanted arrows to yourself as a Wood Elf player.
Probably.
So we've got the Banner of Midsummer's Eve for 15 points. Gain them ignores cover special rule.
Yeah, I think this isn't. I think that I would consider this on a bigger unit of Blade Guard. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because then you can do something like park your big unit. I mean, what's big? They come in a minimum of 5, but 10, 15, even more if you want, in a wood. So then they're harder to charge, they're harder to shoot if someone wants to shoot them, and they're just ignoring that.
Mm.
So I do actually think that's not bad. And also, often the stuff you want to shoot will be partially blocked by some kind of screening unit. Well, you've got this banner and you don't care. So I think that's fairly priced at 15 points, and I would take it on a big... I think, for me, the place I would put that is on a big unit of Blade Guard. I can't see immediately where else it would go, because I wouldn't... I mean, the downside of this, actually, is that you've then got to take your standard in a unit of Blade Guard, and I don't really want to do that.
Yeah, true, because it's then sacrifice it for a unit that's not going to win combat anyway. It's potentially sacrificing 50 points on the victory points nurse.
Exactly. Yeah. So, but I think if you're going to do, I'd take that on a bigger unit of Blade Guard. I think it's a nice banner.
Yeah. Now, from the generic magic items list, I think the Razor Standard is one to shout out as well for giving the Armor Bane 2. So putting that into a big unit or a unit with the multiple shot 2 arrows.
Or a unit of combat blenders with no innate AP like Wardancers.
Yeah, I think there's a real big shout for Wood Elf specific, or more than a lot of other armies, at least for my own personal taste, of having that like armor bane popping off standard because of the low AP of a lot of their attacks and their lots of shots nature. We've next got the enchanted items. We've got the Wraith Stone for 50 points. Unless the enemy is fleeing, enemy units suffer a -1 to their leadership while within 6 inch of the bearer.
So it's expensive at 50 points, but it does play into that same issue with terror that I was talking about.
Yeah.
So you've got terror causers in the shape of the dragon, the tree men, potentially your wild riders if you put that banner on them. So it helps you with that quite a lot because you're stacking that really in your favour. At 50 points, it is quite a lot out of a magic items allowance, and just 50 points is quite a lot in general. But
no,
yeah, I think I'd really want to build around that though, with some of the other things in the list, be it that standard, having terror causers.
Yeah, no, I think actually one of the things I think would be really good with this, having a BSB with a normal magic items limit on this Wraith Stone, turning fear into terror banner, and also having, say, like a war banner on your wild riders. So then you've got a 3 static combat res, but actually you're causing terror and having a -1 from the Wraith Stone and banner. So causing -2 to the actual leadership characteristic. So modifying when your enemy's just going to break and run rather than fall back in good order just by winning some combat a bit more.
That's it. Yeah, that's a really good shout. Yeah. So I like that item. I think I'd want to think very carefully about how it's going to fit in. And actually, on a BSB is a good. I think that'd be a very good use of a BSB in a Wood Elf army.
So the Hail of Doom arrow for 35 points. I've had a bit of a sneak peek of Phil's opinion there. It's single use. Models with the Asari longbow only. The Hail of Doom arrow can be fired from the bearer's longbow. Place a small blast so that your central hold is directly over the centre of the target unit. Any base that lies underneath the template risks being hit, suffering a strength 4 AP -1 magical attacks. Single use, 35 points. Too expensive.
Wait. I mean, you can take more than one. Take as many as you want. But
It's the
why
35
would you do that?
points, right? It's if I take
Yeah,
more than one, it's on a lord that's now using 70% of his, or 70 points of his limit. It is 70% as well.
yeah. It's. I mean, you're just not getting enough hits for a start, are you? On that 3-inch template, I don't think. And like, the Hail of Doom arrow used to sort of annihilate a unit of fast cav in one go. It's probably good that it doesn't do that, but the result of that is that it needs to not be 35 points.
If it was the small blast and it was like every turn,
Yeah, yeah.
cool. Like, it seems like a fair and balanced item. The single use, I think, is what kills it.
Yeah, if it's single use, which I guess it makes sense given what it is, it needs to be a lot cheaper than that. So, no.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to have Alric the Mad to be able to get something that returns to you.
Yeah, exactly.
We've got
Exactly.
the Wailing Arrow for 20 points, single use, Asari longbow only. A Wailing Arrow may be fired as normal, however, if you suffer any unsaved wounds, from the shot, the unit must take a panic check as if it had taken heavy casualties. Single use 20 points and a panic check only resulting in fallback in good order. Sorry, Phil, I jumped in before you could say anything, but yeah,
I mean,
no.
it's just no. Yeah, I don't understand how anyone could think that's worth 20 points.
No, it's when you were taking panic checks like in previous editions, you just broke and ran and then
100%,
couldn't
yeah.
move next turn. I'd chance it because
Yeah.
you're falling back in good order, auto rallying, and then can freely move next turn. It's not. It could put someone out of chat. It could do something sometime. There will be situations where it just works and changes the entire battle, but not
they've got to pass
all the time.
No, but they've still got to fail the check.
This is what I mean. Like,
if it just made them fall back, like Wind Blast just makes you give ground. Obviously, it does damage to you as well. But that's good because if you get that spell off, you're making them give ground. They've got no choice. Whereas, well, no, it's not a choice, is it? But yeah, most times they're not even taking a.
And I get to reform as well. After I fall back in good order, I get to reform. Exactly. I'll just reform back into a marching column.
No, I mean, and it's single use. I mean, it's just both of those are fortunately hard to justify.
Yes. Finally, we've got the arcane items. Just before we get onto the wizards within the list, so it's a fairly opportune moment to do them. We've got the Deepwood Spear for 45 points. Unless the bearer of the Deepwood Spear is fleeing or engaged in combat, they may use it when an enemy wizard that is within 6 inches of a piece of wood terrain successfully casts a spell. You don't dispel the spell, and you can't try to. It's cast as normal. However, once it's been resolved, the enemy wizard suffers D3 Strength 4 hits at AP -1, which is largely like the AP -1 is largely by the by against wizards because they mostly
usually
have rubbish saves. But the Strength 4, fairly decent.
Yeah, like I think you could do some pretty like you could kill a wizard with this, no question. Your enemy is a bit in control of it, obviously, because they can just not cast the spell within 6 inches of woodland terrain, potentially. Depends how much is on the table. Obviously, you're putting your piece down, how much else is there, have you cast tree singing, that sort of thing. You might have done, obviously, which would make it a lot better. But they're in control of that. And you can't dispel the spell, which is a bit of a shame. For 45 points, I think I'm not going to be taking it regularly.
I think it's too situational against those wizards that are toughness 3.
Oh yeah,
I'd be terrified.
Excellent.
But against wizards that are toughness 4 or more, which granted isn't loads and loads, but it's enough. It's like chaos wizards, orc wizards,
mounted. Any that are mounted on some nasty creature.
Yeah,
are going to be less affected.
Yeah, so it's situational and too expensive to be situational.
I think that's it, isn't it? If it was 15 or 20 or something points less, maybe I'd think about it more. Plus, you've got your opportunity cost. You can only take this. You can't then take another arcane. I guess you can take the common one.
Yeah. The Oaken Stave, however, for 40 points, I think is very good.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is my... I'm have and expect to take this pretty most of the time on my spell weaver.
Yeah.
Whichever is level 4.
So it's while within 3 inches of a woodland terrain feature, the bearer increases dispel range by 3, and you roll an extra d6 when making a dispel attempt and discard the lowest.
Good.
It's I don't know how far we need to go into explaining that this is good, because it'll be like a hard agree for like a couple of minutes. But needless to say, getting that extra d6, discard the lowest, increases the chances so much. And having a 54-inch bubble created by a level 4 sorcerer or level 3 sorcerer is brilliant.
I agree. Yeah, really good item, I think. Really good.
And just makes the irresistible dispel as well go off more frequently.
Yeah. And you're not unlike some of the items where you have to roll 3 dice, and if there's 2 ones, you are outclassed in the art or whatever it is for dispelling. It doesn't say that, so you just discard one of those ones.
Yeah.
So very good. And you've obviously got, I think it's good whether you're on foot or mounted, you've got the control of where you put woods, so you can plan around this with your mage on foot. Oh, I've got a wood near my deployment zone now. You're going to stand in that and dispel everything.
Yeah.
Great.
The Wand of Witch Elm, 30 points. Once per turn, if they're within 3 inches of a wood, the bearer of the Wand of Witch Elm may reroll a failed casting roll.
I mean, that's not terrible. It's not as good as being a high elf, unfortunately. Well, you just get that for being a high elf, and don't even have to be near a wood. I mean, I just prefer the Oaken Stave. I think it's so much better for 10 points more.
I agree. I definitely agree that the Oaken Stave is better. I do like the Wand of Witch Elm on a lower lower level wizard that you might have hanging around the flanks. For 30 points, it fits within your limit. Isn't too expensive to be off-putting. And you're going to be failing that cast more often with a lower level wizard. Whereas a level 4, it's like roll. Oh, I pretty much always successfully cast on an average roll. A lower level struggles a lot more.
And actually, you're right, because it's only a failed casting roll. So with your level 4, you couldn't say re-roll, oh, I've just hit the casting value and I know you're going to try and dispel that. Oh, I'll fish for a better roll. You can't do that. Yeah,
exactly.
So yeah, I agree. I can see for a level 2, maybe, or even a level 1, maybe, but I wouldn't be
level 1s. Level 1, do they exist?
Well, I mean,
where my level 1s at?
Yes, if you make your Shadowdancer a wizard.
Shall we go on to the wizards, since we're talking on wizards?
Let's do that.
Oh no, let's not. Let's go on to forest sprites. Just very quickly, or as long as you want.
Yeah, so you get so with forest sprites you can take as many as you want across your army, but you can't duplicate them. So you can only have one of whichever one it is taking. And then you get a 50 point allowance, I think, for both of the nobles, which is quite generous on top of your 100 points for your blade captain already. Obviously, then you put a lot of points into this character. Some of them are definitely good. I think the standout for me that's always going to be good on a combat character is an Annoyance of Netlings.
Yeah, so that's 15 points and does -1 to hit when in a challenge. And it's for only 15 points, that's something that is usually much more expensive. Like Slug Skin, I know it affects the entire unit, but is much more points than that. And when you want your Lord to be surviving, although it's not modifying the toughness. It's, do you know, like, it's not helping you with your toughness downside, it's just skipping getting to that point.
Yes. Yeah. So, do you want to go through them all?
Yeah, let's just give a quick rundown of them all. A Blight of Terror is 50 points. Gain terror to you and your unit. I really like it. It's -1 leadership. Although, obviously, the banner is slightly cheaper to do it if you're doing it in Wild Riders. But it doesn't come out of your magic item allowance of anyone, so it can be stacked with other things. I think it's quite a nice place for that. And going straight from nothing to terror.
Very good.
Very good. A Muster of Malevolence, 40 points, Wood Elf Nobles and Waystalkers only. An enemy model hit by one or more shooting attacks made by the model's longbow suffers an additional D3 strength 2 hits with Armor Bane 1.
40 points is a lot, I think, for that.
Yeah, at least it's not single use.
Yeah.
The bows. Yeah. I'm not going to make a strong argument for this is really good. That is not what I'm going to do. But it's at least something you get to do every turn. You get to be satisfied in your forest spriteness every turn. The Befuddlement of Mischiefs, 30 points. During the combat phase, a single enemy unit that is in base contact with a model suffers -1 to both its weapon skill and initiative. I think that is good for tying into... I think it's good for tying into high initiative. The weapon skill is a bit more meh, because most of the time it will be... Although you've got a high weapon skill, most things tend to hit you on 4s anyway, and you'll just likely make them still hit you on 4s. The initiative thing, I'd like a little bit more, because it means that on the charge, things will end up striking behind your things with Elven reflexes when your enemy charges you. So I quite like
and it's the whole unit as well, as you say, which obviously is important for that.
Yeah, because it means that, say, like a Bretonian lance, and that's just the first unit that popped into my head with Initiative 3. A Bretonian lance on the charging the full 3 inches, and it goes to Initiative 6, down 1 to 5, and he's now simultaneous with your Elven Reflex Initiative 4 dudes.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's good. I actually like this better though. If you're going to have a Treeman or a Treeman Ancient, or potentially even on a champion of the Treekin unit, because that means you're only taking it there because they're each once per army, and it helps with your tree whack.
Okay.
Because it lowers their initiative, so it just means that it's much more likely that someone's going to fail that initiative test and then get free whack.
And here is the key thing for looking through this list a lot more than I have the time to do.
Yes, but that's the interactions that aren't obvious necessarily on the first read, is it? But I do think that's like, I would put that. I don't think that the weapon skill doesn't really benefit the elven characters that much, like for the reasons you said. The tree man, it potentially does benefit a bit more because they're low weapon skill, so I think it maybe helps them a little bit.
Yeah, for taking enemies down from hitting you on 3s into hitting
that kind of thing.
4s.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. A Murderous Sprite, 25 points. When this model's combat is chosen during step 1 of the combat phase, a single enemy unit that is engaged suffers D3 strength 2 hits, AP -1. I think it's too expensive for something that's only got a wound on 5s and only kick off a couple of times a game.
Yeah. Agree.
And that's 5s on a good day. Lamentation of Despairs, 20 points. Unless the model is fleeing, enemy units that are within 6 inches suffer -1 to their leadership when making fear, panic, or terror checks.
The problem with this is that it doesn't affect break tests.
Yeah, it's immediately, like, I'd start looking at it and being like, oh, it's on terror checks, but a lot of the time I'm going to be outside of that 6 inches. So it's not going to kick in. It's not like you terror bomb people anymore from like flying into the middle of an army and then being like, everyone take a terror check, I'm here.
Yeah, exactly. What you'd really want is to combo it with the fact that you can have lots of terror causes with your Blight of Terrors and your Banner and your Treeman and your Dragon. But yeah, it's good if they fail a terror test and run away when you charge them, but then they might get away. That would be bad. I mean, obviously, if they got charged by a unit of Wild Riders, potentially you'd run them down because of your movement, or a Dragon, I suppose. But you might probably roll them over anyway with those units.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's bad. It's not expensive at 20 points. And obviously you are going to inflict some panic tests on people with your shooting probably. So that's also not bad, although you've got to be close to them. I don't know that I'm keen on that necessarily. I think sometimes that's maybe one of the problems is I'd prefer to just beat them in combat with the thing that causes terror.
Yeah. It's a common thing, I think, is that things get costed at, I'd say 20 points isn't too expensive, as you said, but it's costed at a similar to level to things that just kill things. Like taking a unit out of the game because it's fled for a turn is not worth the same as, well, just killing that unit.
No.
So finally, we've got the Resplendence of Luminescence. Gain magical attacks for 10 points. Don't
see. I think
like, terrible.
No, I think this has its place. I wouldn't take it most games, but I can see why you might. So if you're going into, like, say you're playing an event and you're thinking, right, there's going to be some really annoying ethereal stuff. Okay, you will probably have some magic that could hurt it, but you can, because it confers to the unit. So if you've got a character like this, the way I would take this is if I was taking a Waystalker, that's right, isn't it? Yeah. With my Waywatchers, right now they've got magical attacks on their arrows, and I think that's not bad actually. Then because some annoying ethereal thing, some annoying ethereal thing pops up, and I just hose it down with their whatever arrows they choose to take. So I think there, it's got a niche application, and at 10 points, a niche application's totally okay with it.
Yeah, so like the flip side to the stuff that we've been saying when it's niche and 30 points, not worth it. Here is the points level where we've been saying that we would start taking things.
Exactly.
Yeah. So now on to Wood Elf Mages. And we've got the Spellweaver and Spellsinger. He's fairly classic, like level 1, 2, 3, 4 levels.
Yeah.
The slight difference in the Wood Elves here is the talismanic tattoo, so you do get some sort of ward save built in, but for 15 points, is it worth it? I think it's a bit too expensive for that 6-up ward. Otherwise,
it's just not.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so I think I did check this, and the profile and points cost are exactly the same as the High Elf Mages with their stupid rerolls. But I'm obviously not at all bitter about. But yeah, talismanic tattoos, I just think at 15 points, I agree. It should be, really, that's the kind of thing that you want in build. Because are you going to pay points for a 6-up ward on something that, if it gets caught, is going to die? I mean, that's my question, and I don't think I am.
No. I think is the very simple answer. And otherwise, it's just a mage. Battle magic is fairly solid, I think, for level 1s and 2s, because the casting values are lower, although the spells aren't as good as some of the other laws. Illusion is, I think, very good. High magic is very good. Elementalism is solid. So they've got access to good laws depending on where you go. Like level 4's, I think, more suited to high magic because it's higher casting values. Illusion, you can do some lulls and take an ogre blade and spectral doppelganger people with the the ogre blade.
Or if you really want to take the dragon slaying sword. and then go and one-shot a dragon. A mage.
Yeah, it's all valid techniques, I think. But he's fairly similar to what a lot of other wizards that you can use can do, because obviously he's built around the magic laws, and both of what we've just said are with generic magic items for that illusion, the illusion spell. Now, where I think there's a bit of the difference is Warhawks being very solid for Wood Elf mages here, because they're faster, and actually the better AP value, I think, matters on Wood Elves, where you've got... It's not like Bretonnians where your army's stacked with lances at the AP -2, and your damsel's going to be buried in one of those units. I think the Warhawk actually picks up the value of that lower level caster more substantially, as well as having the evade to avoid the shooting.
Yeah, and feigned flight, so you can run away and then rally automatically, and the 360 line of sight, and obviously the movement is really strong, I think. I do think there's a good case for keeping your mage on foot, because, as we said, if you're taking the oaken stave, well, you're going to be able to have a wood near your deployment zone if you want, or in it. So you're not going to struggle with being in range for dispelling a lot of stuff.
No, I think the benefit of the Warhawk is that I'm not going to have to spend a turn hopping between woods if there are multiple across the board. That I can fly my 20 and just get there and do something else, versus like having to maybe like run and then next turn be able to be within the range of another wood.
And I think there is something else that's quite important about that. I think one of the benefits of the Warhawk is it's going to help you like manage getting, if you're taking tree singing as one of the spells, which is one of the spells in the Lore of Athel Loren. And I think it's the one that I would most often be taking. And it's a magical vortex, and effectively, so it's a magical vortex with your 15-inch range, and it's got that dual casting value. And if you cast it on the lower value, you get a 3-inch blast template, higher value, 5-inch blast template within 15 inches. And then it counts as a woodland terrain feature and dangerous terrain for your enemies. So you can't put it on top of anyone, because with it being a magical vortex. And obviously when you cast it, your opponent's going to get a chance to dispel it. They might struggle because you've got a level 4. Assuming you're using a level 4, obviously. Which maybe you're not. Maybe you're using a level 1. But if you're using your level 4, they might struggle to dispel it when it's first cast, but then they're going to get a chance in their strategy phase of their turn to do that dispel, and then it would not be on the whatever you rolled to cast it. So that's one of the reasons why I like the Warhawk, because it allows you to potentially position your mage out of dispel range when you cast that spell, and then they can't dispel it at the start of their turn because they haven't moved. So that I'm not saying you're always going to be getting it off like that. That involves like quite a lot of positioning, obviously, and it depends where the enemy wizards are to dispel that, and they might fated dispel it, obviously that's possible, but I do think for that reason the Warhawk's quite good, because I like Tree Singer. I think it's a very good spell, not least because you can just like stick a 5-inch blast template, if you get it up at the higher value, in front of like a dragon or something, and then it can't see, so it obviously can't charge.
Yes. Now it also comes in with your 4-up ward save armor.
Correct.
Which I think is very good, especially in like your turn, where obviously they got to dispel it against your actual roll. So although it's not going to be there all the time in the enemy turn, it allows you to basically position that where you want in a turn where it's going to matter, have that survivability. Yeah. And I like tree singing. Everyone needs to make their little tree template in the blast template.
Yeah, but I do, and I think that's my sort of go-to. There might be other times I would take like Forest Walker, maybe.
Now this is the other interesting one, right? Like it's a conveyance 10 plus to cast, range 24. Target a friendly wood elf character that is completely within woodland terrain. So long as it's not fleeing, remove it from play, replace it in a different wood anywhere on the battlefield, not within 6 inches of the enemy. You can't move again during the movement phase. So you can't be using it to charge, but
No.
to just teleport about the battlefield any range. Yes, you need multiple pieces of forest terrain, but you're picking your spells after you know what the board looks like anyway.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And you could have another mage with tree singing to create some potentially. But I mean, like I say, I think at most times I'm going to be picking tree singing, but I can see times when maybe for a forest walker would be good. You could move a Treeman Ancient around with it, which I find quite funny. It's just I don't see why you would do that. It doesn't seem the most obvious candidate for it. I mean, I suppose it gets him out of trouble. I think that'd be maybe the reason you do it. But if he's down to his one wound and about to be charged, right? Well, let's just move him.
Well, it doesn't say that you can't cast it into combat, right?
No, but it doesn't say you can.
Touche.
So I don't think you can, which is a shame because that would be amazing.
Yeah, to just be able to be like, oh no, you were actually hitting a random tree.
Yeah, that'd be brilliant. But yeah, so I think like tree singing is, I am planning around taking that because like my army does have a level 4 in on Warhawk with the open stave.
Let me just pick my jaw up off the floor.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, taking the open stave obviously does influence your choices because then you're not taking a law familiar.
Yes.
So
because it's not common.
Exactly. So, given that, I will probably mostly be taking elementalism because I'm happy with most of the spells you could roll on elementalism, and I wouldn't want to take the signature spell from elementalism. I don't think so. I'm fine with taking tree singing.
Yeah. So and it's one of them like the more niche builds of like spectral doppelganger illusionists are going to be very specific things that you build into.
Yes, absolutely.
Rather than, not you specifically, Phil. I don't know whether you're going to enrage everyone by ogre blading everyone to death. It's not been done in the area yet, but
maybe once just for fun.
Yeah. Well, that comes up to maybe in the same game when you stack BSB with Terror and +1 and like War Banner on your Wild Riders and stack Vanguarding Wild Riders, yeah. But you no point because what you actually want to do is stack giant eagles behind whatever enemy unit, so that when they fall back in good order, they chain bounce off the eagles all the way off the table.
That's how to play Wood Elves. Enrage everyone.
Yeah, exactly. Now, if you don't want to enrage everyone, I think you play Flock of Doom Caster, which is a magic missile 9+ to cast 18-inch range. Place a 3-inch blast template. Enemy
I'm already not interested.
Under the base suffers a single strength 3 hit with AP -1. I think it's one of the worst magic missiles that there is.
Terrible. Why would you ever take that?
Yeah.
Truly. No.
Yes. Moving on. Shall we go on to the other characters of the Shadowdancers first?
Yes. So I love Shadowdancers. I love Shadowdancers. Well, I love Wardancers, and obviously the Shadowdancer is the Wardancer character. So just like the aesthetic and the way the unit plays, I like as well. But I think Shadowdancers are pretty good. I mean, they're loners, so you're only taking them either sole or with a unit of Wardancers. But I do like Shadowdancers a lot.
So they movement 5, weapon skill 8, which is hefty. So you getting hit by weapon skill 3 opponents on 5s. You've got strength 4, like your Lord and Noble, 2 wounds, initiative 7, which comes into it when someone else has always strikes first.
Mm-hmm.
3 attacks, leadership 8, and he's only 85 point, which I'd say is a bit of a steal.
Really good.
Yeah, you're a level 1 wizard.
Oh, you have to upgrade.
Oh,
to
you
that.
upgrade to a level 1 wizard.
Yeah,
Yeah, maybe. I think a level 1 is too low. Like, whenever I played a wizarding hat and been a level 1 wizard, I've just never got any spells off.
No.
And it's been a bit useless.
You'd have to be like, right, I'm going to take a Lore Familiar and Spectral Doppelganger and a Power Scroll. And then you could maybe do some real... I mean, because we're presumably going to get onto the weapons. I mean, you wouldn't want a Spectral Doppelganger hitting you with the Spear of Lower.
No, I don't think that fits into your magic items limit, though.
Oh, yeah, you might be right.
Yeah.
That's probably for the best.
Yeah. So shall we get into them? Because this is what you were saying, the actual magic items weapons section was a bit useless with its paired blades.
I think so, yes.
The spear and the Trickster's blades exist.
Yes. So you've got the Spear of Loic. It's obviously a combat weapon, strength +1, so it's sitting at strength 5. It's got your built-in AP 1, armor bane 2, and killing blow. So I would say that's a pretty good weapon.
Yeah.
Then your other option is Trickster's blades, which give you plus D3 attacks. Both of these are free. I prefer the Spear of Loic.
Yeah, so it's effectively a single-handed halberd, even though you're not going to be having anything in your offhand because you don't actually have having a hand weapon originally doesn't allow you an additional hand weapon attack because that's a specific weapon set. So it might as well be two-handed like a halberd, but yeah, it's a halberd with an additional armor bane and killing blow. Now the armor bane is an odd choice because I suppose it works against monsters, but the killing blow doesn't. But when killing blow does work,
armor bane's irrelevant.
Yeah. But the killing blow access and 3 attacks for a cheap, but for 85 points, I think is very good. And Furious Charge getting you to 4 attacks.
Yeah.
Just magnifies
it. It does, and then also because you're probably putting him into a unit of Wardancers, you get the benefit of the Dancers of Loic, so you can do the things that Wardancers let you do, which improve you in combat in various ways.
Well, shall we weirdly do Wardancers right now so that we're talking about them at the same time?
Let's do that.
We veered from the book.
Yes, it proved to be in a bad order.
So we've got Wardancers for 16 points each. They're movement 5, elf standard. Weapon skill 6, though, which is very high. Strength toughness 3, initiative 6, 1 attack, leadership 8. You do have Furious Charge, so you get into 2 attacks, and can take additional hand weapons if you so choose for +1 points a model. So that's up to 3 attacks on the charge for 17 points. You can take throwing spears, which are the fighting 2 ranks on the charge, for free. However, with no armor, unless Philly's about to correct me, to gain a shield in the offhand, you might as well just use the additional hand weapon to have the +1 attack all the time. Is my sort of bit of thought there.
I mean, the only reason you take a throwing spear is if you're going to have guys in the back rank, right? I mean, why else would you do it?
Yeah, adding the guy in the back, like the second rank, will only give you the same amount of attacks as that +1 from the additional hand weapon. Though I suppose if you're dying on the charge by being striking,
but they're motley crew though, so you can have a mix.
I suppose for having that second rank of. Yeah. There we go. Phil gave us the answer. You've got move through cover, open order, skirmishers, strike first, which is very good at the initiative 6, and talismanic tattoos for the 6-up ward, just built in.
Yes.
And the dances, Phil, will you take us through the dances so I don't make a fool of myself?
I'm sure you weren't going to do that. So
Or
whirling
maybe
death.
you already have.
So you get to pick this at the start of every combat phase. So it's not like you choose this weapon and you're stuck with it. You can change turn to turn. So whirling death, you improve your AP by 2. They have no AP base, so that's obviously very good. Storm of Blades, you get the extra attacks +1, which again is good. I mean, yes, they've only got 1 attack on the profile, but often you can have 4 attacks per Wardancer because you've got your base 1, you've charged for 1 with your Furious Charge, additional hand weapon and the Storm of Blades, so you can throw out a bucket load of attacks with them. The Shadow's Coil takes them to a 4-up ward, which again, if you get stuck charged by something you don't want to be charged by, you're probably going to still hit first because you've got strikes first. So you might take out the odd one, or maybe more if you've got a Shadowdancer in there, and you can have a 4-up ward, which is not bad. And then Woven Mist puts you at -1 to hit. So just the flexibility of choosing is really good, I think. They can be skirmishers or open order. I've not kind of made up my mind about that. I've used them so far as skirmishers, and I think that's probably the better option.
I think tying into the rest of the list's mobility is such a key part of the list. Do you know, like just list in general and how it's used? Having bubbles of 360 charging Wardancers to pin down anything that's going to be flying behind you. Whilst I know other things skirmish, but these specifically can take out those threats that your shooting units might not be able to do as easily. And using them in that sort of counter-chargy way, I think is going to be an effective use of them, really.
I agree. And so we mentioned the Razor Standard earlier. I think the Razor Standard is a good... If you're putting a Magic Standard or any standard on the Wardancers, I think that's the standard to pick, to give them that armor bane, because they don't... Obviously, they could pick the AP -2, but then they're losing the chance to pick more attacks. And although they are very high weapon skill and a lot of attacks, they're still only strength 3. So you're generally at best going to be wounding at 4s and quite often on 5s. And therefore, actually, that Razor Standard is turning, say, half of your hits into AP, half of your wounds into AP2. So I do think it helps a little bit with their weaknesses. You've got to be careful throwing them into the higher toughness, higher armor valued stuff.
Yeah, I think even there's a shout for going that AP -2 and using the Razor Standard to just be -4 on the 6s, which is just like crazy levels. It's like that's AP great weapon, but except they're striking at initiative always strikes first.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, and then I think I like adding a Shadowdancer because it just helps a bit with that weakness against higher toughness stuff. So he's got Killing Blow, which he's not got loads of attacks, but I suppose he's got a fair few, particularly if you choose Storm of Blades as the dance. And then I've had my Wardancers go through like Minotaurs, and you'd be thinking, well, that's potentially a pretty tough target for them, but they've just blundered them. And I wouldn't necessarily rely on them doing that to tough units, but I do think adding the Shadowdancer in, I just like the Shadowdancer, but also I think it does help bulk the unit up a bit.
Yeah. How many have you been tending to run and even speculate about?
So like 8, 9, 10, that kind of number. They're not there for static combat rares. They're there to absolutely blend whatever they come into contact with, and therefore have nothing hitting back at them. Because if it does start hitting back, they're going to die. I mean, they've got save, but so that's sort of number and running them as skirmishers. I think there's a case for smaller units as well, like a unit of 5, just as not as your main combat threat, but as there to sort of countercharge or combo charge. I think has some merit as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and just like to have a cheaper unit that you don't need to. Like, I'm desperate to get my points back with this unit. 5 of them being 80 points, and just being able to just like casually hang around to take out a unit of like the classic 5 fast cav that try and flank people. If any do manage to slip through, I've got an 80-point unit to just take those out.
And they will take a unit like that out.
Go on to the Waystalkers. So for 85 points, you get movement 5 as standard with elves. You get weapon skill 6, but ballistic skill 7, strength 4. So your Asari longbow, obviously strength 4, like the other nobles, but it's just worth pointing out specifically here.
Good boost, yeah.
Yeah, the 2 wounds, initiative 5, 2 attacks, leadership 8. Now, the main thing about these is the hawk-eyed archer rule.
Yes.
Right. So, do you want to tell us what it is?
Yeah, so basically you don't suffer the targeting restrictions that everyone else suffers when shooting at characters. So you can target a character who's within 3 inches of an infantry character within 3 inches of an infantry unit or whatever. Ignore that. But also you can target a model within a unit. So you can target a champion, you can target a character. The problem with that has got Wood Elf players raging is that does not ignore Lookout Sir. So yeah, you can target that champion or that BSB or that wizard, I guess would be the best one to target. But they still get their Lookout Sir. And there is a view that makes the Waystalker useless. The Waystalker is also a tax for Way Watchers. You have to have a Waystalker in order to take a unit of Way Watchers, which I don't really think is a great design choice personally, but it is what it is.
No, I think limiting things to be unlocked by heroes, it's not my personal taste, but...
No, and it would have been more okay with the Shadowdancer, because the Shadowdancer is an obviously good pick, and I would still take a unit of Wardancers with a Shadowdancer because I want to do that anyway. Whereas I would want to take a unit of Way Watchers potentially without a Waystalker. I would say though, I don't think that I think it would have been pretty hard if you could just snipe stuff out. It couldn't have been 85 points, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think one of the things is it forces characters to stay within units.
Agreed.
Is the main thing. I wouldn't view it as an 85 point. I'm actually going to assassinate loads of characters. It's an 85 point. Oh, your wizards now only have a 90-degree front arc.
Exactly.
It's one of those type of things. Now, if your opponents refuse to do stuff like that, like having a Ruby Ring of Ruin to get 2d6 fireball hits against anything outside of units is something that I'm going to drop and just move on from. Unless Phil particularly wants to pick it up.
No, like, he's the obvious candidate for the Ruby Ring of Ruin, isn't he?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think the other thing I would think about here, this wasn't my idea, but I saw someone had done it, and I think it's a nice idea, is you take him, you put him in his unit of Way Watchers, and you give him a Resplendence of Luminescence, and then they are all magical. And so you can then gun down ethereal stuff. And I think that's where it makes sense I'm not planning to take a Waystalker, or at least not regularly, but I don't think that it's broken just because you can't pick stuff out. I think that's actually better. Otherwise, it'd just be...
It'd be far too good. And I think it's because being strength 4, wounding wizards on 3s, which is like why Phil was saying was the obvious target, was being wizards, and that they've got no armor. Yeah. They're generally lower toughness. At 85 points, wizards usually come in at around like 150. Like by the time you've got the second wizard level, you'd essentially be taking out a level 2 wizard every 3 turns with a Waystalker. Yeah. So if you were if you were hitting without that Lookout Sir, they would quadruple their points cost on average per game if the enemy couldn't look out, sir.
And you'd give him a Bow of Lauren in that case as well, right?
Yeah, it'd just be too much of an auto include, I think.
I agree.
And I think controlling your enemy's movement of wizards is a very good benefit anyway. Yeah, worth mentioning as well, just while we're on him, Fire and Flee, very good rule.
I think almost match the rules that the Waywalkers have.
Yes, yeah, he's just, I mean, like, whereas, say, nobles that we was talking about, like, potentially, like, Bow of Lauren, like, to make Shooty Lord, they don't have the Fire and Flee, whereas, because Waystalkers
unless you put them on a Warhawk, but yeah.
Well, they only get Feign Flight from the Warhawk, not Fire and Flee, don't they?
Oh, you're right. You're right. Yeah. No.
So I think it's such a good one for both being able to escape and shoot.
Agreed.
That your non-combat character just like survives another day to gun down more wizards.
Yes.
And even like maybe think of the Waystalker as not, once you've got those characters into the units, start gunning down the unit champions.
Oh yeah.
Like to deny attacks, and it only takes, I know it takes 3 unit champions to get the Waystalker's points cost back, because they tend to be around like unit price plus 7 or whatever. Yeah. But like if you just equal your costs and have controlled the movements of enemy wizards, I do think they are still good.
Especially because you've got a mobile list, so mobile army, so that 90-degree arc is more restrictive for your enemy. You can force them into units and then make them move in ways they don't want to move to have to cast spells on you. Obviously, it's not quite as good for, I guess, for like enchantments and stuff. But it's still pretty good because you're limiting their freedom massively, actually.
Yeah, most of the time an enchantment, like you'll only be casting it on your own unit then, unless you're stood down like behind.
I was talking rubbish.
Or like hexes. Like
I mean,
because hexes come before the enemy movement, you can like move out of their arc, and now they can't cast a hex on your unit, which I think is incredibly good.
Yeah, I'm talking myself into it, but I do think they made the right choice there. And at the cost, it would have been very difficult to appropriately cost a guy who could target characters and units.
Yeah, ambushes. What do you think of ambushes? All the hard questions. Do you want me to go first?
I mean, I don't. Yeah, go on.
Terrible. Never take it. It's just not worth.
No,
it's just not worth being off the board. For one, being off the board in the key first turns for a shooty army, and 2, I just hate ambushes anyway, because you might not turn up for ages.
Yeah. Like, also, he's a scout, so.
Yeah, just get into a good position, or even just stand 32 inches away at the back of your board and snipe people anyway. What is he doing ambushing for an extra 10 points? Like, if I stand on my board edge, I can snipe a character on that if they've deployed at the edge of their deployment zone, and if they've deployed further back into their deployment zone, what are they doing? You're a wood elf army that's going to shoot them to death.
What type of arrows would you give the Waystalker?
Bearing in mind that already getting the tree sprites to get the magical attacks, I agree with you on that one. With ballistic skill 7, I don't think you're needing those quick shot arrows, because you're going to hit on a 2 anyway, regardless of whether you've moved and cover.
Plus, you already ignore cover, which is the other benefit of that arrow. So
yeah, coming back in, because I have flicked back to just make sure of things. The multiple shots, yes, I can take the Bow of Lauren, but this one's much cheaper. The -2 AP is tempting because you can hit even unit like higher toughness unit champions easily. Wound on 4s for toughness 4 with -2. I think that's
I think so. I think Arcane Bodkins, probably on the Waywatchers as well, And I would take Ascendi's Bane if I had the 10 points, definitely. So reroll more shots.
Yeah.
And another, I mean, I suppose it's arguably wasted the magical attacks bit, but you're getting another armor. It's 10 points. Reroll. Yeah, I'd have it.
If you've got 10 points at the end of the list, experiment with one of the many things that is cheap and situationally useful. Next,
quite like the Waystalker, actually.
As a revised opinion, onto the forest spirits of the list. We've got the Treeman Ancients for 265 points. Now, movement 5, elf standard, even though they're not an elf. We've got weapon skill 5, BS 5, strength 5, toughness 6, wound 6, initiative 2, and 3 attacks at leadership 10. Yeah. Clocks in as a Behemoth character with Oaken Fists, which are standard AP -2, which is solid because it's the same as a great weapon. And with the strength 5, you wound in most chaff, or the toughness 3 chaff on 2s anyway, so you're effectively a great weapon at 1 initiative higher than other great weapons. You've got Strangle Roots, which is range 12, strength 5, in AP -1, and multiple shots D6 +1 at your BS 5, which is fairly solid. I don't actually mind that at all. You can be
usually probably hitting on 4s, but yeah.
Yeah, but even with the minuses, like it's still like strength 5 with D6 +1 shots. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah.
You've got, and these are tasty. You've got level 3 for 30 points because you're a level 2 base anyway, but you're not going to be a level 2, right? Level 4 for plus 60 points. And you can take battle magic or elementalism.
What self-respecting Treeman Ancient isn't a level 4?
Yeah. I mean, it's the Treebeard that we sort of wanted more. Like evil Treebeard with magic.
Evil Treebeard, exactly.
So you've got Close Order and you Behemoth, so you can have just be on your own and still get Close Order. Flammable, immune to psych, large target, Lore of Athel Loren, so you can make your own trees. So you can just make more trees with the Lore of Athel Loren than they can dispel.
Yeah, that's one approach, yeah.
Yeah. Magical attacks, move through cover, regen 5, stomp attacks D3, stubborn, terror, timber, so you kill even when you fall over, tree spirit, and tree whack. I think a really solid character.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I really like the Treeman Ancient, but I think, it does mean that if you want to, you can have a lot of magic in the list, because you can have a level 4 Spellweaver and a Treeman Ancient in 1,000 points in theory. I don't know if that would actually fit in your points allowance, but you can have a lot of level 4s if you want to do so. Obviously, you can't take magic items, so you've got to take that into account when you're picking your spells, or no, you're not picking your spells, when you're picking your laws of magic. And I actually like battle magic for the Treeman Ancient because he's obviously a big and fairly slow unit, and I kind of expect him to see combat. And therefore, I think in combat, the Treeman Ancient isn't actually amazing. He's only got 3 attacks. He's got a lower weapon skill than the standard Treeman. Obviously, he's got the stomps and he can do the tree whack and stuff, but he's not going to rip through things just with that low number of attacks. So I like the idea of having battle magic and then taking the signature hammer hand, is it? Whatever the assailment is, which is the signature spell for battle magic. So that's my thinking there. We'll see whether that is a bit too cautious in terms of thinking I need to protect him by having that. I don't know.
No, I'd agree on that, because also on battle magic you've got Oaken Shield, which although it only casts on yourself, it means that you can get a 5 up ward in addition to your 5 up regen.
And your full plate, yeah.
Yeah, and your full plate, so he's very protected. And I do think you need to be doing wounds, like a bunch of wounds, because you're not unbreakable, you're stubborn.
No, exactly.
Like, unlike other like, I think giants are unbreakable, right? And like other such creatures. So I think
He's
tree
vulnerable,
work helps here.
basically. Yeah, I do think he's a bit vulnerable. He's certainly vulnerable to static combat resolution.
Yeah, yeah, and
So,
with a low, like with 6 wounds, your unit strength 6, it only takes 13 models to make you auto break rather than fall back in good order.
yeah, it's just that's it. So yeah, okay, he's stubborn. So turn 1, he's going to fall back in good order, up to the first turn of the combat if he loses it. But you're then having to get something else in there, or you die, basically.
So it is, as you say, more vulnerable to getting doubled out after that first turn, and it's obviously only once per game that the stubborn will kick in.
Yeah.
So I do think battle magic is a good choice. Like elementalism on the flip side of it, the 5-up ward that you get in only will kick in, meaning that you can't charge, which isn't where you want to be.
No.
And yeah, I think it pairs much more nicely with the Treeman. Does battle magic anyway.
Bit of a sort of immersion breaking that he's using fireball and stuff, but he's flammable.
We can just gloss over that. There's a lot of hypocrisy in a lot of the armies, and I think
Exactly.
a tree using fireball, he's angry at the other trees as well. Yeah,
exactly.
Now,
so he can obviously take forest fights.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yeah. No. Let's go into forest fights.
Yeah, and he's got this huge 100-point allowance. There's no sensible way I can see to use it. Like, he already causes terror, so the 50-point blight of terror is irrelevant. He's not a Wood Elf Noble or Waystalker, so he can't take a muster of malevolence. I don't know how many of these I really like. I mean, he's already got magical attacks. An Annoyance of Netlings, yes, because he might end up in a challenge as character, so could do.
Well, I think that's actually probably the one that I'd say was most useful for him. The Annoyance of Netlings and Befuddlement of Mischiefs. The Annoyance of Netlings in the challenge is, I think, useful because it will allow you to do multiple wounds with your tree whack and stack up combat res whilst not chancing so many wounds in return. So long as you're not doing it to like a super hard, mega killy character. But I think you should maybe be dealing with those in other ways. Like, rather than just trying to have the most killy character. I don't think that's going to happen that often with Wood Elves.
No.
Better to pick apart your opponent's army in other ways than that. And just going against units that only have champions and whacking the champion so much that you win combat against even a static combat res of 4 is only heightened by Annoyance of Netlings, I think.
And then a Befuddlement of Mischiefs, yes, to help you get that free whack off.
Yeah, exactly. Like, he takes you to weapon skill, or like takes your opponent down 1 weapon skill. So even elite units you'll be hitting on 3s. Then you'll be getting your D3 stomp attacks, like tying in, and just building up the overkill res. Or hopefully overkill res, because hopefully you'll be doing more.
I really like the Treeman Ancient. Really like the Treeman Ancient. I'm not sure that the absolute best tournament list has a Treeman in, but I'm not playing that list.
Well,
I mean, I think it's a fun. He's good, and there's a lot there. It's nice to have this kind of tough caster who is also a working tree.
Yeah, and he's even with all of those upgrades, only comes into like 350 points, like with the or less than actually. So you're not near the Dragon Lord level 4.
No.
Like if you're taking a Chaos Lord, a Chaos Sorcerer on Dragon, they're clocking in at over 500 points before, or like 510, I think, before magic items. So you're significantly cheaper than that. And although you've not got them like the 9 wounds, the maneuverability, you've got other things going for you, I think.
Yeah. And with battle magic, you've got some of the some other nice spells there that you can. Yeah, you're probably going to end up in combat, but you've got stuff to do while they're closing. You might be getting, obviously, if you've got Fireball, that would be great. Or Curse of Arrow Attraction's a very good spell for a Wood Elf army. So I do think, and Elementalism wouldn't be a bad pick, and you can experiment, obviously. But yeah, I like the Treeman Ancients.
Yeah, so the Branch Wraith. So for 80 points, you get a Movement 5, Weapon Skill 6, Ballistic Skill 6, Strength Toughness 4, 2 Wound, Initiative 6, 2 attacks, and Leadership 8. You've got Hand Weapon and Light Armour, essentially. And you're a level 1 wizard with Battle, Elementalism, and Illusion. You can take additional Hand Weapon, Great Weapon, be a level 2 for 30 points, which I'd 100% do if I'm taking this character, and have Forest Sprites, but no magic items again.
And then you've got Regen 6 is probably the main thing, and Flammable.
Yeah.
A list of special rules.
I don't love this character.
No, hard sell. I mean, this is like the Dryad character, obviously. And if I was taking one, I agree. I would make it a level 2, and I would take a Great Weapon, I think. Those would be the things I would do. Because Dryads are not that hard-hitting, so I think having those... But it's only 2 attacks.
Well, this is it. It's like champion-level number of attacks, which is really bad. And it's
really bad.
Yeah, the fact that you're missing out on your Initiative 6 with the Great Weapon puts me off a little bit. The Great Weapons are great in general.
It's weird because that's actually less attacks than a Dryad champion. Dryads have 2 attacks base.
Yeah, it's
who knows?
It seems an oversight to me because they sort of, if they're casters automatically, or they. I was looking at the Treeman, Treekin, and Dryads, mainly Dryads and Branch Wraiths, because I'd been reading the Bretonian book, Night of the Realm by Anthony Reynolds, and there's really good scenes. I suppose the entire 3rd book is set within Athel Loren, and it's really good depictions of like the winter war between the forest spirits and the wood elves. Oh, great! I'll start looking into it, and I got looking at the Dryads and the Branch Wraiths, and I was like, they're not great enough to do an entire army based around for me. I take them if you want the character. They sadly couldn't spawn an entire army for me, is what I'm saying.
No, because you're not survivable either. That's the other thing. Okay, you're toughness 4, which isn't bad. Obviously, there's entire armies that are toughness 4, and it's not like it's good protection, but it's not amazing. And you've only got light armor, so that's just going to be cut through so often. And then you regen, but it's a 6-up, so A, if you hit with a flaming attack, you don't get it. B, it's hardly ever going to save you anyway. Yeah, it
doesn't add enough combat power to a Dryad unit as well for me to think like.
No, I think you're right.
Like, I'd surely just take a separate caster and an additional 2 Dryads or whatever in my Dryad unit to be the 2 wounds, and then you end up with more attacks.
Agreed. And also, like, because you can't take magic items, you're not able to like ameliorate some of the problems of being a lower level wizard by like picking your spells or whatever.
Yeah, or even taking the blades of plus D3 extra attacks and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It would be an expensive way of mitigating the problem, but at least a way of mitigating the problem.
So yeah, not the best.
And that brings us to the end of the characters. That is the culmination of part 1 of our Wood Elves guide. We decided to split it into 2 because actually we got to the end of this first part and it ended up being about a 3.5 hour guide when we got to the end of the infantry. So the infantry and cavalry, as well as Great Eagle, will be in part 2. and hopefully everyone's enjoyed listening to it. If you did enjoy listening to it, please do the YouTubey stuff. It does help this reach more people and benefit the channel in that way for getting more exposure. If you really like it, there's a Patreon link below where you can get yourself podcast formats of all these Tuesday videos, as well as access to the Discord where we can discuss it further. And with that, I'll catch you in the next video in a bit.